One of the fastest ways to ruin a day at Disney is to wear the wrong shoes. I'm Larissa, and these are my Disney shoes, tips, and tricks. I always pack at least 2 completely different pairs of shoes to go to Disney, usually something along the lines of a pair of tennis shoes and then a pair of flip-flops. I always find it helpful if I've been wearing the same pair of shoes, even if they're not specifically giving me any issues, I haven't had a blister, they're not rubbing me anywhere. Sometimes the next day to switch to a completely different pair of shoes really just gives my feet a break and makes me a lot more comfortable. And those 2 pairs of shoes do not include any sort of fancy dressy shoes. If we're going somewhere nice for dinner one night or something and I want to dress up, that's a completely different pair of shoes. Those do not count because they're not really going to give me a break and they're probably not going to be all that comfortable anyway. The next step is actually choosing which shoes to take, and that's going to vary from person to person. You want the shoes that are the most comfortable for you. For instance, I prefer flip-flops most days. They're comfortable, they're cool, they dry out quickly if they get wet, they're just what's comfortable for me. However, my husband is not really a sandal or flip-flop wearer. If he's not going to be going swimming, like the beach, a pool, a water park, he does not wear flip-flops. It is just not his style. So he wants to wear tennis shoes all the week at Disney. Another thing to keep in mind is just because you have a pair of shoes that you wear all the time at home and have never had any trouble with them doesn't necessarily mean that they'll be a good Disney shoe. Something to keep in mind is that you're going to be on your feet, standing and walking a ton at Disney. So just because you have a pair of shoes that you wear all the time at home does not necessarily mean that they're going to be a good pair of park shoes. My husband and I have been going to the parks pretty regularly, so we don't feel the need to be there from rope drop to fireworks anymore, but we still average like 7 miles a day. That's a lot of wear and tear on your feet. To me, one of the most important things to keep in mind when choosing a pair of shoes for Disney is how do those shoes handle getting wet? Between sudden downpours and unexpected splashes on rides, your feet are likely to get wet at some point on your trip. So look at each pair of shoes and try to decide if these suddenly get drenched, how am I going to feel about that in an hour, 2 hours, 6 hours? Are you going to be miserable all day because it's a giant sponge that's going to soak up all that water and be impossible to dry out while you're in the parks? Or are they going to air out really quickly and be perfectly fine? Or maybe if they are wet, it still isn't going to bother you. Totally up to you, totally a personal decision, but something to definitely keep in mind. For instance, I don't wear real leather sandals or ballet flats in the parks anymore. If they get wet and then you do all that walking around all day, they're going to get stretched out and possibly ruined, and that's just no fun to ruin a pair of shoes. Plus, walking around in wet shoes is going to be a lot of friction, and that's going to mean more blisters. And once you get the blister, it's going to be there for several days. No matter how many Band-Aids you put over that, if you only have that one pair of shoes, or every pair of shoes that you have rubs in that same spot, you're going to be miserable and it's just going to keep compounding as the days go by. So that's part of why I usually bring something like a flip-flop that I can wear around the parks and be fine with that, or wear it to, say, the water parks or the pool. But I also like to bring something like a tennis shoe. Sometimes that extra coverage is a little bit nice. It feels a little bit cooler than having your whole bare foot out sometimes, but at the same time, having to deal with like a sock or a thicker shoe can also feel hotter. That's totally up to you again. Also, having a shoe with even a little bit of built-in arch support is always going to be very helpful as opposed to a shoe that is completely flat. I do wear a shoe like this, in fact this exact shoe around parks sometimes, but I usually try to keep it to a shorter day if it's just I want to look a little bit cuter and we're only going to be in the parks for maybe 3, maybe 4 hours. Other than that, I definitely go for my more comfortable shoes. For the past several years, these memory foam Nike flip-flops have been my go-to park shoe. They're kind of my go-to summer shoe in general, but for the parks they're particularly great. I like that the squish and foam that these ones have a lot more durability than a lot of the cheaper alternatives that you can find in places like Walmart or wherever. These just sort of hold up and last a lot better and give me a lot more comfort than some of those cheaper ones, which, to be fair, are better than your typical sort of like $1 flip-flops. But still, these have been my favorites, and I really think that they are very much comfortable all day long in the parks, and they're pretty nondescript, so they can go with about any outfit. One of the downfalls of any shoe involving any sort of foam is it's basically a giant sponge. So if you get caught in a downpour on Monday, keep in mind that there's a good chance that that pair of shoes isn't going to be dry for at least a day or two. So it's always a good idea, again, to have at least that second pair of backup shoes that you can at least wear until the other ones dry out, and also to give you that whole alternating footwear idea so that your feet will be a little bit more comfortable. These are also Nike flip-flops, and I had high hopes for them. They were a little bit cheaper and they still felt very comfortable and squishy, so I really thought they were going to be great, and I wore them around running errands for several days before I went on the trip, and I never had any trouble with them, so I thought they'd be great. But as usual, lesson learned, I got to the parks and this narrower, firmer band than the usual Nike flip-flops I'm used to definitely gave me a blister, mostly on one foot, but it definitely ended up on both of them. So I had to be a little more careful with that. So I won't wear these like all day in a park now, but I do like that these are not quite so spongy as my other ones. So these have become kind of more of a water park kind of shoe. So I wear these when I want to avoid getting my other ones drenched for days, but they're just not as comfortable for me personally to wear all day in the parks. Now keep in mind that having comfortable shoes is important, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have expensive shoes. There's all kinds of wonderful ways that you can sort of hack your shoes to make them more comfortable for those long park days. For instance, these were $5 at the dollar store, and I was super excited about them. They were okay for around the house, running errands, a simple normal day, but I didn't think they'd quite cut it in the park, so I may have hacked them just a little bit. I know from long personal experience that I tend to get blisters on the back of my heels because of the way that they're shaped. So as I normally do with a lot of my shoes anyway, I went ahead and put a heel liner back here. That just really helps hold everything in place. The back of the shoe is not rubbing against me constantly because it's not moving, so I'm much less likely to get a blister here. I don't have to worry about like the rim here or anything, having like a stiff thread or something that pokes out and rubs me. It's just going to keep everything in place and contained, so I avoid blisters there. I've also been known to add a gel or memory foam liner into the bottom of shoes. Sometimes I will even add 2 insoles into a pair of shoes, particularly in a case like this, where the dollar store ones had essentially like no insole to them. It was like almost like moleskin. It was just nothing at all padding wise. I added actually 2 different insoles into this one. I have a gel one as well as a memory foam one. They make the shoe a little bit tight, so if you have shoes that are already kind of snug on you around, not so much in the length, that might not work for you, but these ones for me, they only came in solid sizes, so I kind of had to go up half a size anyway, so I had the extra room. Plus, I really liked how getting the shoe tighter, it holds snugger to my foot and is not moving around so much, so again, decreases blisters. You can get these insoles all over the place. Walmart, Target. I think I actually got this pair that's going to go into another new pair of shoes I got for the parks at Aldi one day, so they were only a couple bucks. Great deal. I do like, a lot of the times I feel like I get better results buying 2 cheaper pairs and stacking them together in a pair of shoes as to paying more and only getting 1 nicer insole. But if you're only going to have room for 1, that might be a better option for you. To me, another important factor when I'm choosing a pair of shoes for myself is how much do the shoes weigh. I know that sounds silly, but if I've got a very, very lightweight pair of flip-flops as opposed to a kind of heavy tennis shoe, I'm definitely going to pick this flip-flop. You're going to be walking all those miles all day, and it sounds silly, but another pound of weight that you're going to have to haul around all day could really make a big difference. And those are my Disney shoe tips, tricks, and hacks. I hope you found them useful and helpful. If you did, I hope you'll subscribe down below and thumbs up this video. Have a beautiful day, and I'll see you next time.